This story is titled My Best Friend Affair with My Wife. Cost him everything. Here's how I got revenge. Hey, I'm Jake, 34 male. I'm not the kind of guy who shares his personal life, but what happened to me a few years ago changed my perspective on loyalty, family, and trust. Back then, life was simple. Or so I thought. I was married to Laura, 33 female, my high school sweetheart, for 7 years. We had 2 amazing kids, Mia, 6 female, and Ethan, 4 male. To anyone on the outside, we were the perfect family. We had a house in the suburbs, the kind with a backyard big enough for the kids to play, and neighbors who lent sugar when you ran out. I worked in construction management, a job that wasn't glamorous but paid the bills and allowed Laura to stay home with the kids most of the time. She also did some part-time admin work, but her main focus was being the supermom everyone admired. And honestly, she seemed to love it. We had our share of date nights, lazy Sundays, and family outings to the zoo or the beach. Our social circle was just as tight. Bob, 35 male, and his wife, Lisa, 32 female, were practically family. Bob wasn't my best friend in the world, but he was someone I trusted. We'd grill steaks in the backyard, watch football on Sundays, and even took a few camping trips with our families. The kids got along great, which made hanging out easy and fun. Lisa was a sweetheart, quiet but thoughtful, always the one organizing potlucks or sending thank you cards. Laura's behavior started to change. She became protective of her phone, keeping it in her pocket or face down on the table, and her new routine of frequent girls' nights seemed out of character. At first, I didn't think much of it. She said it was good for her to get out, but her vague explanations and late returns raised questions I couldn't ignore. Around the same time, Bob started flaking on our usual hangouts. This guy who would never miss a game day suddenly had excuses every week. Work's crazy, man. Or Lisa's got me running errands. It didn't seem like a big deal at first, but looking back, the timing was too coincidental. Then, there were the kids. Mia and Ethan started casually mentioning how often they stayed with Laura's parents. They loved their grandparents, so it wasn't a red flag at first. But when I asked Laura about it, her answers were always rushed. It's just easier for them to stay there when I'm out late. I thought it'd give you a break. Her parents lived an hour and a half away. That's not exactly convenient. The feeling in my gut grew heavier. I wasn't the type to pry, but it felt like pieces of a puzzle were being laid out, and I just couldn't see the full picture. Something was off, but I wasn't ready to confront it yet. Instead, I started paying closer attention, hoping I was wrong. The breaking point came one random Tuesday night. Laura had gone out for another girls' night and left her laptop open on the dining table. Normally, I wouldn't touch her stuff. I believed in trust and didn't want to be that guy who snoops. But something about that night was different. The kids were asleep, the house was quiet, and my curiosity got the better of me. I sat down and opened her email. What I saw made my stomach drop. There they were, messages between Laura and Bob. They weren't casual or friendly. They were explicit, giddy, and horrifying. They talked about their meetups in detail, how exciting it was to sneak around, how clueless I was, and even how much of a pushover Lisa had become since having kids. My hands trembled as I read more. The timestamps showed this had been going on for months. While I was working late to give my family the life they wanted, my wife and my so-called friend were busy destroying it behind my back. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart racing. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry all at once. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to act on impulse. If they thought they could play me for a fool, they were about to learn the hard way just how wrong they were. Sitting there in the dark, I started piecing together all the little signs I had ignored. The phone, the girls' nights, Bob's sudden unavailability. It all made sense now. The worst part was knowing how much I had trusted them. Bob had been in my home, eating my food, playing with my kids. Laura had smiled at me every morning, kissed me goodbye, and pretended we were fine. The night I found the emails, it was like my entire world collapsed in an instant. The words on that screen weren't just words. They were the evidence of betrayal. A betrayal so deep that it felt like the air had been knocked out of me. But I didn't yell. I didn't confront her immediately. Something inside me, some strange, calm voice, told me to wait, to gather more, to be deliberate. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. My mind raced, connecting dots I hadn't even realized were there. All the subtle signs, the phone glued to her hand, the increased girls' nights, the shared glances between her and Bob at barbecues, they all made sense now. I wasn't just paranoid. I'd been played. But it wasn't just Laura who had betrayed me. Bob, my friend, my buddy, the man I'd invited into my home, trusted with my kids, and laughed with over beers. That stung just as much, if not more. Betrayal from a spouse cuts deep, but from a friend? It's like salt in an open wound. The next morning, I called Ron, an old friend from college who had worked as a cop before becoming a private investigator. He picked up on the second ring. "What's up, Jake? You sound off." "I need your help, man," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I think Laura's cheating on me. And I think it's with Bob." There was a pause. "Damn," Ron finally said. "You sure?" "Pretty damn sure. I found emails. Explicit ones. But I need more. I need proof I can take to court if it comes to that." Ron didn't ask any more questions. He just told me to forward him everything I had and promised to get to work. The next few weeks were hell. I had to pretend everything was normal, even as my insides twisted with anger and disgust. Laura would smile at me over breakfast, asking if I needed anything before I left for work. I'd force a smile back, my stomach churning at the thought of where she'd been or who she'd been with. Bob, meanwhile, had the audacity to keep acting like nothing was wrong. He'd text me about football games, send memes, and even suggest a guy's night out. It took everything in me not to tell him to go to hell, but I knew better than to tip my hand. One night, while Laura was out for another girls' night, Ron called me with an update. "I've been following them," he said. "They're not exactly subtle, Jake. I've got photos of them meeting at a motel twice last week. Same one both times. Room 214. I closed my eyes and let out a breath. "You're sure it's them?" "Crystal clear. I've got timestamps, license plate numbers, and even a couple of videos. These two aren't being careful." Ron's thoroughness was both a blessing and a curse. I wanted the truth, but hearing it confirmed made the betrayal feel even more real. Socks. One of the hardest parts of those weeks was pretending everything was fine for the kids. Mia and Ethan had no idea what was going on, and I was determined to keep it that way. Mia would run up to me after school, excitedly showing off her drawings, while Ethan begged me to help him build another Lego tower. "Can we have pancakes tomorrow, Dad?" Mia asked one evening, her eyes wide with hope. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "You know I can't say no to your pancakes." Laura walked in a moment later, carrying a shopping bag. "Hey guys, look what I got for you," she chirped, pulling out a new set of markers for Mia and a toy truck for Ethan. The kids cheered, completely oblivious. I stood there, watching her play the doting mom, and it took everything in me not to snap. When Ron sent me the final report, I knew it was time to act. He had gathered more than enough evidence. Emails, photos, receipts, and even video footage of Laura and Bob entering and leaving the motel. The timestamps aligned perfectly with the nights she claimed to be out with her friends. The worst part? In one of the videos, they were laughing as they walked out of the motel, completely at ease. They looked like two people without a care in the world. Meanwhile, I'd been at home, reading bedtime stories to our kids and wondering what I'd done to deserve this. I took the report to my lawyer the next day. "This is more than enough," she said, flipping through the photos. "You've got a solid case for divorce, Jake. And with this kind of evidence, custody shouldn't be an issue." Custody. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about ending my marriage. It was about protecting my kids from the fallout. Mia and Ethan were my everything, and I couldn't let them grow up in a home built on lies. The day Laura got served was one I'll never forget. I had arranged for her to receive the papers at her office. She called me an hour later, her voice shaky. "Jake, what is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, keeping my tone cold. "I know everything, Laura. About you and Bob. Don't even try to deny it." She didn't. There was a long pause, and then she started crying. "I'm sorry, Jake. I never meant—" "Stop!" I interrupted. "You don't get to play the victim here. You made your choices, Laura. Now you'll face the consequences." I hung up before she could say anything else. But I wasn't done. Lisa deserved to know the truth too. She was kind, unsuspecting, and had done nothing to deserve this. I didn't want to blindside her, so I asked Ron to deliver the evidence to her personally. The next day, Lisa called me, her voice trembling. "Jake, I had no idea. I can't believe this." "Neither could I said. "But you deserve to know." She thanked me through tears, and I could hear the strength creeping back into her voice. Lisa wasn't the type to wallow in self-pity. If anything, she seemed determined to take control of the situation. Within a week, both Laura and Bob's lives had started unraveling. Laura moved into a small apartment, and Bob was kicked out of his house. Lisa filed for divorce, emptied their joint bank account, and fired Bob from her dad's company. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was numb. The fallout was just beginning. and I had no idea how far-reaching it would be. But one thing was clear. The life I thought I had was gone, and there was no going back. After Laura and Bob were exposed, the chaos began to settle, on the surface at least. But beneath the calm, I was navigating a storm of emotions, responsibilities, and changes I hadn't prepared for. My marriage was officially over, and so was the life I thought I'd built. Now, it was about moving forward. The first step was the kids. Mia and Ethan were my top priority, and I knew they deserved stability, even if their parents couldn't provide it together. I sat down with my lawyer to hammer out the custody details, determined to ensure that they stayed with me. Laura didn't put up much of a fight. How could she? The evidence I had made it clear she wasn't fit to prioritize anything but herself. Still, explaining the situation to Mia and Ethan was the hardest part. I spent hours talking with a child psychologist, trying to figure out how to break the news in a way that wouldn't shatter their little worlds. One Sunday morning, I sat them down on the couch, their favorite blanket draped over them. Ethan clutched his stuffed dinosaur, while Mia fiddled with her hair. "Hey, kiddos," I started, my voice softer than usual. "Mommy and Daddy need to talk to you about something important." Laura sat next to me, uncharacteristically quiet. She looked pale and exhausted, probably from nights spent in her new tiny apartment. I wasn't going to let her off the hook for what she'd done, but for this moment, it wasn't about us. "We love you both so much," I continued, "but Mommy and Daddy are going to live in different houses now. You'll still see both of us, but things are going to be a little different." Mia's eyes widened. "Why?" she asked. Laura hesitated, glancing at me, so I stepped in. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems they can't fix, but that doesn't change how much we love you." Ethan, too young to fully understand, just snuggled closer to me. Mia, though, looked between us, her little brows furrowed. "Is it because of the nights Mommy didn't come home?" My heart dropped. I had to remind myself that Mia was a smart kid, maybe too smart for her own good sometimes. I took a deep breath. "It's not your fault, Mia. It's just something between Mommy and me. But I promise you, no matter what, you and Ethan will always be taken care of." She nodded, but her eyes glistened with tears. Laura reached out to touch her shoulder, but Mia flinched away. That small reaction was like a knife to the chest. Laura noticed it too, and withdrew, her face crumpling. Once the custody arrangement was settled, I focused on creating a new routine for the kids. Mornings became a bit of a circus, me juggling breakfast, packing lunches, and making sure no one left the house in mismatched socks. But I learned to love the chaos. Mia started helping out, showing Ethan how to put his shoes on properly, or reminding me to sign their permission slips. She was growing up faster than I wanted, but her resilience amazed me. The evenings were my favorite. After dinner, we'd curl up on the couch for movie nights or tackle giant Lego projects that Ethan always insisted on building bigger and better. Mia got into baking, and our kitchen soon became a war zone of flour and frosting. It wasn't the picture-perfect family life I'd envisioned, but it was ours, and I was determined to make it as happy as possible. Laura, on the other hand, was struggling. She'd gone from being a stay-at-home mom with part-time work to someone trying to rebuild her life from scratch. She moved into a cramped apartment on the other side of town, and her visits with the kids were awkward at best. Mia, still hurt and confused, barely spoke to her during their visits. Ethan, ever the innocent one, clung to her for a while, but even he seemed to sense something was off. Laura tried to win them over with gifts and trips to the zoo, but kids are smarter than we give them credit for. They knew something wasn't right, even if they couldn't articulate it. She called me one night, her voice thick with frustration and sadness. "They don't even want to see me," she said. "Mia won't talk to me. What am I supposed to do, Jake?" I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone tightly. "You earn their trust back," I said bluntly. "You don't get to fix this with toys and ice cream. You show up, you listen, and you stop expecting them to forgive you overnight." Her silence on the other end was deafening.
Meanwhile, Bob was dealing with his own fallout. Lisa didn't just kick him out, she obliterated him. She filed for divorce, froze their accounts, and made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly what he'd done. Bob lost his cushy VP job at Lisa's dad's company, and word on the street was he'd moved in with a friend who lived 2 towns over. One afternoon, I got a call from Lisa. I hadn't heard from her since I'd given her the evidence.
"Jake," she said, her voice firm but tired. "Thank you for telling me the truth. It hurt like hell, but I needed to know." "You didn't deserve any of this," I said. "Neither did your kids." She sighed. "I'm trying to keep it together for them, but honestly, I'm glad he's gone. It's better this way." I admired her strength. Lisa wasn't the kind of person to let betrayal define her. She was already making plans to go back to school and had started looking for a new job to support her kids. As for me, rebuilding wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I started going to therapy, not just for myself, but for the kids too. I didn't want them to grow up carrying the weight of what had happened. My therapist, an older guy named Dr. Neil, helped me work through the anger and guilt that had been eating at me. "You're allowed to grieve, Jake," he said during one session. "This wasn't just the end of your marriage. It was the end of the future you thought you had." Those words stuck with me. For so long, I'd been focused on being strong for the kids that I hadn't allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. But slowly, I started to let go of the pain and anger. Not for Laura or Bob. They didn't deserve my forgiveness, but for myself and my kids. All right, everyone, before we dive into the final update, I have a small request. We put a lot of effort into finding these incredible stories for you every single day, and your support means the world to us. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us grow and allows us to continue bringing you more amazing stories. Thank you. Now, let's move to the last update. Update! Hey Reddit, it's Jake again. I wasn't planning on posting an update, but I've gotten a few messages asking how things are going. And honestly, a lot has happened since I shared my story. So here's where things stand now. Life's better, but not without its complications. First, the good stuff. Mia and Ethan are thriving. Mia, now 8, has really leaned into her creative side. She's obsessed with painting and drawing, and her room looks like an art studio exploded. She even asked me to buy her a sketch pad, big enough for her biggest ideas. Ethan, 6, is still my little daredevil. He's into soccer now, and watching him on the field is both exhilarating and terrifying. That kid has no fear, which is great until he's sliding into someone twice his size. Our home is finally feeling like a sanctuary again. I've worked hard to create a space where the kids feel safe and loved, and while it's not perfect, it's ours. We still do our Saturday pancake mornings, and Friday nights are for movies. Ethan's been on a Toy Story kick lately, and I've seen Buzz Lightyear save the day more times than I can count. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Laura's still in the picture because, well, she's their mom. We have a custody agreement that gives her every other weekend with the kids, but let me tell you, it's been complicated. Mia, my little genius, is still holding on to a lot of resentment. She's polite when she's with Laura, but you can see it in her eyes. She hasn't forgiven her. And I get it. Mia's old enough to remember the nights Laura didn't come home, the tension in the house before the divorce. She doesn't say much, but when she does, it's sharp. One time after a visit, Mia came home unusually quiet. I asked her what was wrong, and she just shrugged and said, "Mom says she's sorry, but if she is, why'd she hurt us?" What do you even say to that? Tried to reassure her that people make mistakes, and that it's okay to feel upset, but it's hard. I don't want to poison their relationship, but I also can't erase what happened. Ethan's more forgiving. He's younger, so he doesn't fully understand the depth of what went down. He loves Laura, and always comes back from her place with stories about the fun things they did, going to the park, baking cookies, stuff like that, but even he has moments where he seems unsure. Recently, after a weekend with Laura, he asked me out of the blue, "Why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" I had to take a deep breath and remind myself to keep it simple. I told him, "Mommy and Daddy don't live together because we're better at taking care of you when we're apart, but we both love you so much." He seemed satisfied with that answer, but it left me wondering how many more questions he'll have as he gets older. As for Laura, she's trying. I'll give her that. She's been showing up to all of Ethan's soccer games and even came to Mia's school art show last month. Mia avoided her like the plague, but Ethan was thrilled to see her there. I'm not going to lie, having Laura in the same room still feels weird. We exchange pleasantries for the kids' sake, but there's an unspoken tension that never really goes away. There was one moment that really threw me, though. After Ethan's last game, Laura pulled me aside while the kids were busy chasing each other around. She looked nervous, which isn't like her. "Jake, can we talk?" she said, her voice quiet. "About what?" I asked, already bracing myself. I want to know if you think Mia will ever forgive me. I've been trying, but she keeps shutting me out." It took me a second to respond. I wanted to tell her that forgiveness isn't something you can force, that she'd have to earn it by being consistent and patient. But instead, I just said, "I don't know, Laura. That's up to her. But if you keep showing up and being there for her, maybe one day she'll see you're serious about making things right." She nodded, but I could tell it wasn't the answer she wanted. "Ik sta voor higat." On the Bob front, there's nothing new to report. Last I heard, he's still out of state, living in a friend's basement or something. He hasn't reached out, and I hope it stays that way. Lisa's doing great, though. She's back in school, working on her degree, and crushing it as a single mom. We still talk occasionally, mostly about the kids, but I've got nothing but respect for how she's handled this mess. As for me, I'm finally starting to find myself again. I've been hitting the gym, focusing on my work, and even went on a couple of dates. Nothing serious yet, but it feels good to put myself out there. I'm learning to let go of the anger, not for Laura or Bob, but for me. Holding on to it was like carrying a weight I didn't need anymore. The kids and I are in a good place overall. It's not perfect, and there are still moments where the cracks show, but we're moving forward. I'm teaching them that it's okay to feel hurt, but it's also okay to heal. Thanks for reading, and for all the support last time. Life isn't always easy, but it's worth fighting for, especially when you've got too little reasons to keep going. Till next time.